I got 12 clips for you, but, it totals about 33 minutes of presidential speeches. So we're not going to be able to get to all those. So I'm going to pick and choose some of the best ones over the past 50, 60 years, basically going back to FDR when we started maybe really widespread recording these presidential speeches, and they got the audio quality to stand up. So we've got some of our favorite portions of some of our favorite presidential speeches. And, of course, one unifying theme you'll notice is that a lot of these have to do with war. So let's go back to the 1933 inaugural speech by Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance.
Wow. I tell you what, FDR was really in order. I want to jump back into some of these presidential speeches, though. I'm going to have to skip the day that will live in infamy's speech where FDR actually declares war on Japan in December of 41 following the Pearl Harbor bombing. And I'm also going to skip Truman's warning to the Japanese because I see we're running out of time here to do all this. But let's get to President Truman on August 6th of 1945 talking about something that we just did over in Japan in Hiroshima. And listen to the way he describes it.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
Boy, it was almost a clinical description of it, wasn't he? He was very calm at that moment. He didn't really let on exactly what was going on, and of course it'd be a little while for folks really truly understood the power.
That pretty much started it all.
Yeah, that pretty much started it all. And we got so many good clips of presidential speeches that we want to get to. We got more clips than we've got time, unfortunately, but we're going to try to cover some of the great stuff, an interesting speech by Eisenhower, his farewell address in 1961, and then maybe get into some of the speeches by JFK, President Kennedy. And we're probably going to have to pick and choose on those. I may have to skip his inaugural, which is Ask Not What Your Country Can Do for You, because we want to get into some of his other speeches, which are also pretty darn interesting. And then I got some great stuff from Reagan that I'm hoping we'll have time to get to because he was one of the best. We'll be back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Welcome back, everybody, to the Morgan Streetman Show on this President's Day. And as you know, if you've been listening so far, we're trying to run through some of our favorite speeches by presidents that have been recorded and broadcast in the media. So that limits us somewhat. But some of our favorite speeches that we've heard over the past, about 70 years, actually better make that 87 years. But anyway, we've got some great ones for you, and we just want to jump kind of right back into those because we got so many and we got so little time. Now, this next one is Eisenhower's farewell address. President Eisenhower, he gave it January 17th of 1961. And, we just heard from President Truman about the bombing of Hiroshima. And I don't remember if we heard in the actual clip that I got there that they had spent $2 billion on the Manhattan Project. So I just want you to kind of think about that in the context of the money that we spend today. And there's some ways we could really look at that. In other words, maybe it's just the value of money has declined so significantly since then. But $2 billion was spent, and this built up part of this military-industrial complex, and it's a word that we hear a lot today, but this is where that word originated, is with President Eisenhower's warning in his farewell address.
But threats, new in kind or degree, constantly arise. Of these I mention two only. A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations.
Wow.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Now, you think we've done that? You think we've had the alert and watchful citizenry that has been concerned about the growth of the military-industrial complex? That's something to ponder. Something to ponder. Well, 3 days later, JFK... Excuse me, getting the cinnamon in my throat again. 3 days later, JFK gave his inaugural, saying, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." And that was certainly a speech worth hearing, but we're going to skip over that. And in a very Florida-themed exercise, we're going to listen to this next speech from September 12th of 1962 that JFK, President Kennedy, gave at Rice University. And this is a little bit of a longer clip, but see if you recognize this one.
For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond. And we have vowed that we shall not see it governed by a hostile flag of conquest, but by a banner of freedom and peace. We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but with instruments of knowledge and understanding. Yet the vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if we in this nation are first, and therefore we intend to be first. In short, our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men, and to become the world's leading spacefaring nation. We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. For space science, like nuclear science and all technology, has no conscience of its own. Whether it will become a force for good or ill depends on man. And only if the United States occupies a position of preeminence can we help decide whether this new ocean will be a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of war. I do not say that we should or will go unprotected against the hostile misuse of space any more than we go unprotected against the hostile use of land or sea. But I do say that space can be explored and mastered without feeding the fires of war, without repeating the mistakes that man has made in extending his writ around this globe of ours. There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal?
Listen.
And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Wow, he was a great orator, wasn't he? I mean, he was amazing. You know, and another great orator, and we're going to have to skip over President Kennedy's speech to the American Newspaper Association, where he talks about communism and it being a means of, they use secrecy to try to overcome us. And that's a great speech as well, one that I'd really love to play for you. But I want to get to President Reagan because he was another great orator. I mean, there haven't been many like him. And I'll tell you, if you go back and listen to some of President Reagan's speeches, you'll see the parallels with President Trump, not only in the subjects that they talk about, abortion and the sacredness of life, and other subjects like the involvement of religion in our culture and the importance of it. But you will also hear some of the same phrasings like "Make America Great Again." Now, this speech in particular that I want to play for you is President Reagan speaking to the National Association of Evangelicals in March of 1983. And let's see if you remember this one.
A number of years ago, I heard a young father, a very prominent young man in the entertainment world, addressing a tremendous gathering in California. It was during the time of the Cold War, and communism and our own way of life were very much on people's minds, and he was speaking to that subject. And suddenly, though, I heard him saying, "I love my little girls more than anything," and I said to myself, "Oh no, don't say that." But I had underestimated him. He went on, "I would rather see my little girls die now, still believing in God, than have them grow up under communism and one day die no longer believing in God." There were thousands of young people in that audience. They came to their feet with shouts of joy. They had instantly recognized the profound truth in what he had said with regard to the physical and the soul and what was truly important. Yes, let us pray for the salvation of all of those who live in that totalitarian darkness. Pray they will discover the joy of knowing God. But until they do, let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world. It was C.S. Lewis who, in his unforgettable Screwtape letters, wrote, "The greatest evil is not done now in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not even done in concentration camps and labor camps. In those, we see its final result. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clear, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice." Well, because these quiet men do not raise their voices, because they sometimes speak in soothing tones of brotherhood and peace, because like other dictators before them, they're always making their final territorial demand, some would have us accept them at their word and accommodate ourselves to their aggressive impulses. But if history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom. So I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral inferiority. You know, I've always believed that old Screwtape reserved his best efforts for those of you in the church. So in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all and label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show on this President's Day, and we hope you're enjoying some of these presidential speeches that we're sharing with you. And I tell you, Ronald Reagan's really one of the greatest orators that we've ever had as president, and we got another speech of his to share with you. Now, this is 4 years after the speech that we just shared, the Evil Empire speech that he gave to the National Association of Evangelicals. Now, fast forward, and here he is standing in front of the Berlin Wall in 1987. And this is particularly timely today when we got people who want to vote for a so-called, quote-unquote, democratic socialist. You need to think about what you're getting into.
And now the Soviets themselves may, in a limited way, be coming to understand the importance of freedom. We hear much from Moscow about a new policy of reform and openness. Some political prisoners have been released. Certain foreign news broadcasts are no longer being jammed. Some economic enterprises have been permitted to operate with greater freedom from state control. Are these the beginnings of profound changes in the Soviet state, or are they token gestures intended to raise false hopes in the West or to strengthen the Soviet system without changing it? We welcome change and openness, for we believe that freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Here it comes.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Oh, wasn't that a great moment? Some of us can remember that moment. I remember that moment myself. And we had another moment to share with you from President George W. Bush, but we're running out of time on that one, and that was his bullhorn speech after 9/11. I'm sure many of you will remember. But I did want to get to one final presidential speech today, and that is President Trump's State of the Union, the best is yet to come portion of his speech from just this year. We haven't gotten to share this one with you yet, and we really enjoyed it, so I want to share that with you now.
America is a land of heroes, a place where greatness is born, where destinies are forged, and where legends come to life. This is the home of Thomas Edison and Teddy Roosevelt, of many great generals, including Washington, Pershing, Patton, and MacArthur. This is the home of Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Amelia Earhart, Harriet Tubman, the Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, and so many more. This is the country where children learn names like Wyatt Earp, Davy Crockett, and Annie Oakley. This is the place where the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth and where Texas patriots made their last stand at the Alamo. The American nation was carved out of the vast frontier by the toughest, strongest, fiercest, and most determined men and women ever to walk on the face of the earth. Our ancestors braved the unknown, tamed the wilderness, settled the Wild West, lifted millions from poverty, disease, and hunger, vanquished tyranny and fascism, ushered the world to new heights of science and medicine, laid down the railroads, dug out the canals, raised up the skyscrapers. Our ancestors built the most exceptional republic ever to exist in all of human history, and we are making it greater than ever before. This is our glorious and magnificent inheritance. We are Americans. We are pioneers. We are the pathfinders. We settled the new world. We built the modern world. And we changed history forever by embracing the eternal truth that everyone is made equal by the hand of Almighty God. America is the place where anything can happen. America is the place where anyone can rise. And here, on this land, on this soil, on this continent, the most incredible dreams come true. This nation is our canvas, and this country is our masterpiece. We look at tomorrow and see unlimited frontiers just waiting to be explored. Our brightest discoveries are not yet known. Our most thrilling stories are not yet told. Our grandest journeys are not yet made. The American age, the American epic, the American adventure has only just begun. Our spirit is still young. The sun is still rising. God's grace is still shining. And my fellow Americans, the best is yet to come.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.